The wind howled against the cliffs of Arglass Point, where the sea met the rocks with a rhythmic fury. Waves crashed below the bluff, sending sprays of salty mist high into the air. Atop that bluff stood an old lighthouse, its paint flaking, its windows fogged with time, and its heart long silent. This was where Cillian Murphy found himself, wrapped in a scarf, his boots crunching over the gravel path as he approached the towering relic. The production team had rented the location for the week, hoping to capture a few brooding, coastal shots for an upcoming film. But while the crew stayed in nearby cottages, Cillian had asked to stay alone in the keeper's quarters. Drawn by a sense of isolation he couldn't quite explain. It wasn't just for method acting. It was something else, something quieter. That first night, after the others had left and dusk blanketed the coast in hues of indigo, Cillian wandered the lighthouse's spiral staircase. The air was thick with dust, the silence broken only by the moan of wind slipping through the cracks. He passed forgotten furniture, shelves filled with rusted oil lamps, and a narrow hallway lined with faded nautical charts. Then he noticed a hatch in the floor of what once was the keeper's study, its edges hidden beneath a moth-eaten rug. With effort, he pried it open. The wooden trapdoor creaked and revealed a small crawlspace below. Inside, nestled among cobwebs and rotting books, was an old iron box, its hinges corroded, its surface etched with age. He brought it upstairs, placing it carefully on the kitchen table. With a screwdriver and some persistence, the lid finally gave way. Inside was a bundle of aged envelopes, tied together with a once red ribbon now faded to near gray. Each envelope was neatly addressed in the same looping, delicate handwriting. To Miss Evelyn Harrow, and each was signed, "Yours always, W." The postmarks spanned decades, beginning in 1949 and ending in 99. But not a single one bore a stamp. They'd never been mailed. Cillian's hands trembled slightly as he untied the ribbon. The first letter was brittle, its ink faded but legible. He read aloud softly, the words barely a whisper. "Dearest Evelyn, I saw you again today, walking the pier near Goldfinch Bay. You didn't see me. That's all right. I don't expect you to. But I remembered the way you smiled in spring, and it brought me back to life, if only for a moment." There was pain in the prose, beautiful, aching loneliness woven through every sentence. Whoever this W was, he had loved Evelyn deeply and silently for half a century. That night, Cillian couldn't sleep. The wind howled louder, as if carrying voices of the past along the shore. He sat in bed surrounded by unopened letters, the lighthouse groaning under the weight of memory. Each envelope was a confession never heard, a longing never answered. And as the waves pounded the cliffs below, Cillian realized something. This wasn't just a bomb of forgotten letters. It was a hidden life, sealed shut beneath the floorboards for reasons he had yet to understand. And now it had chosen to be found. Morning broke like a watercolor bleeding across the sky, soft pinks and grays draped over the crashing Atlantic. But inside the lighthouse, time felt frozen. Cillian sat at the old wooden table, the box of letters still in front of him, his coffee untouched and cold. He'd barely slept. His mind was still tangled in the voice of W, the mysterious author of the letters. He had read 3 more that morning, each one more intimate than the last. They weren't just love letters, they were journals, lifelines, pieces of a man slowly unraveling across the years. There were mentions of wartime, of isolation, of small details, like Evelyn's green scarf, or the garden she once tended behind a boarding house in County Down. Each letter revealed new fragments, and each one raised more questions. Who was Evelyn Harrow? Why had these letters never been sent? And why were they buried here in this remote lighthouse, far from anywhere her name had ever been whispered? Later that day, as the film crew returned to set up for a twilight shoot, Cillian slipped away. He had a mission now, not for the film, but for the story he had stumbled into. At the local records office, a small, dusty building wedged between a post office and a bait shop, he asked for anything on Evelyn Harrow. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and coffee-stained fingers, squinted at him skeptically until he mentioned the lighthouse. "You say the name was Harrow?" she repeated, tapping at a yellowed index catalog. She eventually pulled out a binder marked Residents and Families, Ardglass Point, 1940 to 1960. Inside, tucked between census records and coastal watch logs, was a name. Evelyn Harrow, born 1925, died 1961. A thin file accompanied her name. She had lived in a cottage on Driftmore Lane, barely a mile from the lighthouse. No known family, no surviving spouse. It was recorded she had died in a boating accident. Her body never recovered. The record was cold, bare, just ink and paper. But it hit Cillian like a punch to the chest. If she died in 61, then W had kept writing to her for nearly 40 more years. Back at the lighthouse, the sunset threw long shadows across the study floor. Cillian opened more letters. His heart tightened. Dearest Evelyn, today marks 10 years since the sea took you from me. I lit the lamp again, even though they said not to. I had to believe you'd see it, that maybe for a moment you'd remember how we'd talk beneath its glow. In another, the world moved on, Evie. The war ended, the boys returned, and the village filled with laughter again. But my world stopped when yours did. I kept writing because I did not know how else to speak. Letter after letter, the soul of W unraveled. A quiet man, perhaps a former lighthouse keeper himself, who had fallen in love in silence, and mourned in silence too. His grief had become ritual. Every year, on the same day, another letter, another page added to the box beneath the floorboards. The next day, Cillian went to the ruins of Driftmore Lane. The cottage was gone, razed years ago, but remnants remained. A crumbling stone foundation, a rusted gate, wildflowers tangled in what might have once been a garden. He knelt there, placing a copy of Evelyn's file beneath a flat stone, as if giving her a name again. On the way back, he stopped at the lighthouse's lantern room. The bulb was shattered, and the gears rusted, but the view was unchanged. Endless sea, churning grief, relentless memory, and in that moment he imagined W standing there once, watching for a ship that would never return, writing letters no one would read, lighting a lamp for someone already gone. Cillian returned to the kitchen and took out the final bundle of letters. They were marked differently, thicker, heavier, with no dates. Inside, one letter read, "If someone is reading this, then perhaps you found what I buried. I never wanted them destroyed. I only wanted someone to know, someone to remember her. She sang when it rained. She made tea that tasted like honey. And she called me William, not Will, because she said it sounded like a promise." Cillian folded the letter carefully, his throat tight. This wasn't just a story of loss. It was a story of devotion, lived quietly, in the shadows of waves and salt and wind. But there was one more piece missing. Who was William? Where did he go? And had he ever told Evelyn how he felt? Cillian stood, drawn by something deeper than curiosity now. He wasn't done with the box. Not yet. The wind howled like a memory across the cliffs that night, bending the tall seagrass as Cillian climbed the final slope toward the lighthouse. In his hands, he carried the sealed box of letters, now wrapped in oilskin and twine. But this time, he wasn't here to study or to read. He was here to give the silence its due. The sky had turned to ink. Stars blinked faintly above, half obscured by a veil of drifting clouds. Down below, waves thundered against the rocks in a rhythm that felt older than time. He reached the top of the lighthouse stairs, stepped into the lantern room, and placed the box carefully at the center of the floor. Then he stood for a long time, alone, listening, not for a sound, but for a presence, for the voice behind those letters, for the flicker of something unresolved hanging between the years. When he finally descended, it was past midnight. The next morning, Cillian made his way into town, the letters having haunted his dreams. He returned to the records office, this time with the full name. William, just William. It wasn't much, but it was something. He scanned death notices, property deeds, and post-war registries. Nothing under William Harrow. Nothing matching a lighthouse keeper, just a few vague leads, most cold. But then, a single document tucked in an archive of maritime service records caught his eye. William F. Loggery, lighthouse keeper, Arglass Point, 1939 to 1972. Never married, deceased, 1973. Buried with no known kin. Cillian froze. He requested access to the burial registry, and sure enough, a small cemetery outside town held the name. No headstone, just a simple wooden marker, now weather-worn. He borrowed a set of tools from the caretaker and drove out. The cemetery was tucked behind a copse of pine trees, nearly forgotten. Wildflowers poked through moss and dirt. Cillian found the grave easily. It was unremarkable, almost as if the world had tried to forget William as much as William had tried to disappear into it. He stood there a while, the wind tugging gently at his coat. Then slowly he knelt and opened the oilskin-wrapped box. He placed it beside the marker. Not as an offering, as a return. Each letter had been written in hope, grief, and love. And now, finally, someone had heard them. Before he left, he whispered, "She knew, William. I believe she always did." The next day, the crew resumed filming, but Cillian couldn't shake the story. Not of Evelyn, not of William. That evening, he invited the director and producer to the old parlor of the lighthouse, and he told them everything. They listened, first out of courtesy, then with the kind of silence that fills a room when something sacred is being shared. The producer spoke first. "This is better than the script." The director leaned forward, eyes gleaming. We're not just making a film here, we're finishing a letter. And so everything changed. The production pivoted. Instead of a fictional drama set in a coastal village, the new film would tell William and Evelyn's story, truthfully, reverently. The letters were transcribed. A local historian helped fill the historical gaps. Actors were recast. A small cottage was rebuilt as Evelyn's home, and the scenes in the lantern room were shot with the same box that Cillian had discovered. Months later, the film premiered in Dublin. It was called The Light Between Letters. It didn't just get standing ovations. It got silence. The kind of silence filled with awe and something unnameable. People wept quietly in their seats. Critics wrote about it as an elegy in motion. But for Cillian, none of that mattered as much as what happened after. A letter arrived, handwritten, no return address, just a line. Evelyn was my aunt. She never stopped waiting. Thank you for giving her his voice back. Cillian folded the letter gently and placed it in the now empty box. The box that once held loss, now held legacy. And in the years to come, whenever anyone asked him about the film that changed him most, Cillian didn't speak of awards or scripts or roles. He simply said, there was once a man who wrote 50 years of letters to the woman he loved, and they were never lost, just waiting to be heard. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many more wait to be discovered. Subscribe for more untold journeys, quiet heroes, and the moments that change everything. Comment below, what would you have done with the box of unsent letters? Like if this story moved you. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next cinematic tale waiting to unfold. Because sometimes the stories we almost forget are the ones we need most.